Should you add your hobbies and interests to your CV? It's a big question and one I get asked quite a lot here at Standout CV, so I've put together this quick video to answer it. Now, before I get started, if you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. I make lots of CV advice videos and they're all geared towards helping you land the jobs you want. Today's video is all about hobbies and interests and whether or not you should include them in your CV, if they will make an impact on your job applications, and if you are going to include them, how do you go about doing it? So firstly, we're going to take a look at why would you add hobbies to your CV. So it's not just a case of hobbies are good or bad, it's a case of looking at your own individual situation, the jobs you're applying for, and figuring out if it's right for you. So we're going to look at some arguments for and against adding hobbies to the CV. Then we're going to take a look at who should add hobbies to their CV. So some people will benefit greatly from adding hobbies to their CV. So we're going to look at, whether or not you're one of those people. And on the other side, we have people who should not add hobbies to their CV. So some people are actually better off leaving them out of the CV and focusing on other areas. Then we're going to look at which hobbies you should add to the CV. So, which things are actually going to impress people, make a difference, and show you've got some relevant skills to the jobs you're applying for. And then on the other side, we're going to look at which hobbies you should leave out of the CV. And then we're going to look at where and how to add hobbies to the CV. So whereabouts should you place them within the document, and how do you write about them in a way that's actually going to make a difference? Now, why would you want to add hobbies and interests to your CV, and will it have an effect on your job applications? There are some strong arguments both for and against doing so. So let's take a look at four. The first one is to get some personality across. So the CV can sometimes be a bit of a dry, boring document. Adding some interesting hobbies and interests can make you look more exciting and, just liven the document up a bit, make it more of an interesting read. To demonstrate valuable skills, if you have a hobby where you're perhaps writing a blog or something like that, then that can show that you have writing skills, communication skills, editing skills, and things like that. Help you stand out. So if you're applying for a role and there are lots of similar candidates to you in terms of experience and qualifications, then adding some interesting hobbies can make you stand out a bit amongst the crowd. So let's take a look at some of the arguments against adding hobbies to the CV. So firstly, and probably the most important one, is they are not relevant. Often, most people's hobbies have nothing to do with the work they do, so writing about them won't add any value to a job application. It could put employers off if you have some interests and hobbies that perhaps the person reviewing the CV doesn't agree with or finds offensive. Then that might cause them to close your CV down and move on to the next one. They're a waste of space. So a lot of people will argue that a CV is really about your work experience and your qualifications. So if you've got a huge section writing about your hobbies and interests, then you're perhaps wasting space that could be better used writing about other areas. So now that I've confused you by talking about arguments for and against adding hobbies to your CV, I'm now going to help you to decide whether you should personally be adding hobbies to your CV by taking a look at the types of people who should and shouldn't be adding hobbies to their CV. So I'm going to start with the people who should be adding hobbies to their CV, and the first big group that includes is junior candidates. So in particular, if you're a school leaver or a graduate, then chances are you don't have much work experience, which gives you very little to write about when you're writing a CV. So boosting it with some hobbies, getting some hobbies in there and extracting some good skills from them and some good knowledge is a great way to compensate for the lack of experience. People with work-related hobbies. So if you have hobbies that are actually highly related to the work that you're applying for, then it's obviously good to write about them. So for example, if you're applying for roles in technology and you happen to make websites in your spare time, then there's lots of relevant skills that you can pull from those and get into the CV that are actually going to make a difference when you're applying for roles. And the third set is people with impressive hobbies. So if you're somebody that likes to run marathons, climb mountains, raise money for charity, then those are the sort of non-work related interests that can actually impress people and make them more inclined to invite you in for an interview. Now let's take a quick look at who shouldn't be adding hobbies to their CV. So generally speaking, experienced candidates don't need to add hobbies to their CV. So if you've got 10 years experience in your profession and you're applying for jobs that really match your experience well, it's unlikely that your hobbies are going to make much of an impact. If you've got some work related hobbies or some impressive hobbies that we spoke about earlier, then yes, you could add them, but really it's probably not going to make a huge difference. People with common interest. So now if you're like me and you have relatively boring interests like going out to dinner, going to the cinema, socialising with friends, that kind of thing, then those hobbies and interests aren't really going to blow anyone's socks off. So there really isn't any point in putting them into your CV. They're nice to have, there's nothing wrong with them, but there's no place for them in the CV really. Which hobbies should you add to your CV? So if you've decided you're going to get some hobbies or interests into the CV, here are some good examples of ones that might make a good impression on hiring managers and recruiters. Sports teams and clubs. So if you play for a football team or you're part of a debate team or something like that, that can show that you're motivated, you're dedicated, you're proactive, and also there will be a whole host of skills that are involved with that, depending on what it is that you actually attend. So if it's a football team, could potentially be lots of teamwork and communication type skills. Writing. So if you do any kind of writing, so a lot of people write their own blogs these days and things like that. Writing is very, very important in lots of jobs. Written communication, whether it's emails, whether it's writing bids, it's a very, very transferable skill that can be brought into the workplace. So if you do any kind of writing at all in your spare time, that's a good hobby to talk about in the CV. Volunteering. So whether you volunteer for a business or a charity, anything you do like that, there's probably tons and tons of transferable skills that you can pull from that, what you're doing there, and relate it to the jobs you're applying for. Events. So if you're involved in any kind of events, whether supporting them or running them yourself, lots of skills there. Organisation, project management, planning, all very, very important skills in a number of roles. And travel. So travel is an interesting one. Some people don't like it, but a lot of sort of modern trendy firms do like to see travel on the CV. It can mean you're a well-rounded person, you're sociable, you've sort of been out there and experienced things. So if you've not got much experience, it's worth getting travel onto the CV if you've done any. Which hobbies should you leave out of your CV? So now that you've got a good idea of the kind of hobbies you should be including, it's worth taking a look at some of the hobbies that are best left out of the CV. And the first one is common pastimes. So these are things that pretty much everybody does. So this, things like going out to eat, going to the cinema, socializing with friends. There's no problem with doing those things. Obviously, it's just that everybody does them. So it's not going to make a massive impression on somebody. If you tell them that you do these things, it's kind of a given. So it's not worth mentioning them in the CV. Sensitive subjects, so anything that could be deemed offensive to somebody, so any kind of like strong political views or maybe religious views, that kind of thing, it's just not worth putting in the CV. Passive hobbies, so these are things like watching television or watching sports teams, something where you're not actually actively getting involved yourself. It's not worth doing because all you're really saying is that you like to watch other people do things. It's not going to be very impressive to anybody reading it. So the final stage of this video is to tell you how to actually add your hobbies and interests to your CV once you're going to put them in there. Now, this is an example CV for a school leaver, so a very inexperienced person. And so they've had to make, the most out of their hobbies and interests. So they've included quite a big section. Now, if you want to see this CV in a bit more detail, or you want to see some other example CVs like this, then you can head over to the Standout CV website. I'll put some links in the description to where you can find those on the site. And there's also other videos on this channel here where I show you how to write a CV in a bit more detail if you need to learn that. So if we look at the hobbies and interests section here, the best thing to do is add them at the bottom of the CV, because generally speaking, your qualifications, your education, your work experience are going to be more important than your hobbies and interests. So it's important that you write about those first, and hobbies are more towards the bottom of the CV. And obviously what they've done here, this person, they've listed them, so they've got each individual hobby and they've got some details about each one. So the idea is to show some of the achievements that you've made within those interests, to show actually what you've done, what you've achieved and accomplished, and also to demonstrate the skills that have actually gone into doing those things. So things like leadership, motivation, communication, try and draw out those skills to actually show employers that you've got some interesting skills that might be valuable in the workplace. So that brings me to the end of the video. If you found it helpful, please hit the thumbs up button, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got lots of CV advice videos on here that can help you to write your CV and land the jobs you want. So thanks again for watching, and good luck with the job search.